Welcome to the CyBUr Guy Podcast, your source for engaging cyber education, cyber discussions, and a look at current cyber news and trends with retired FBI Special Agent Darren Mott.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another scintillating edition of the CyBUr Guy Podcast. This time, it'll be a little more interesting in the sense that I'm trying to live stream this sucker on Restream through LinkedIn and YouTube. So hopefully, if you are on either one of those, it's working. If it's not, I'll keep trying to figure it out. And maybe at some point in my life, I'll figure out how to get this to work. But this is a special edition. I am joined with my friend Paul Perry from Birmingham in Warren Everett. He is the host of the Rap Podcast. And this is third time on, Paul?
I think it's my third time.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time because we interact a lot on LinkedIn with our certain posts. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking on my LinkedIn page and my YouTube. Oh, there you go. It says it is now live. And so it looks like it's working.
Awesome.
Okay. I don't know if it's working on YouTube. It is. If it's not, whatever, who cares? This will also be on the audio version. So if you're stuck on the audio version, you want to know what the hell we're talking about, this is on being streamed live to probably Paul's 3 friends and no one watching on my end. So there is that. But the podcast will go out, so people will at least listen to the podcast. So wanted to have Paul on to talk about a couple different topics that we've interacted with on our LinkedIn channels here periodically. And since it's the holiday season, we can talk about some other holiday news. But the first item that I really wanted to bring up was my favorite topic, and that is, of course, TikTok. And so I had posted on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago about how I was having problems like explaining to relatives that TikTok was bad and they shouldn't have it. And they're like, why? Why is TikTok so bad? And then lo and behold, a couple of days later, Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, decided to make TikTok illegal, or not illegal. You can't have it on government devices. It's now gone to the omnibus bill that's supposed to be signed this week. That's not supposed to be on any federal government devices. So it's starting to get a lot more attention. Marco Rubio had a whole thing that he posted with some kind of bill. So I invited Paul to come on and talk about TikTok. So Paul, so everybody's heard my take on TikTok. I talk about it all the time. Can't get it. I mean, people are sick of me talking about it, but I don't care because people need to know the risks with it. Tell me, what is your thought on TikTok, the risks associated with it and things like that?
Yeah, and I think Darren, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I think from a TikTok perspective, you have to think about the data supply chain that's out there, right? Everything we use from a technology perspective is collecting information on us, on our activities, what we have on our phones. And if you haven't changed all your settings, there's a lot of things they're listening to. And so I think the issue with TikTok is parent company being the parent company being in China, right? So there's a lot of stories that have come out over the years about how the information that is being collected through that data supply chain, right? Companies that collect data, they're selling it to others to be used for their marketing purposes, right? And so you're combining all of this data. And so it's just the information is out there. And what do they have? What do they know? And then who else are they selling it to? And when you go through and you say, yes, I agree to all the terms and conditions, have you actually read the terms and conditions? And do you know what it actually is collecting? And do you know who they're selling to? And so I think that's the piece that society doesn't always think about. They just say, hey, this is really convenient for me to be able to do a dance and share it with my friends and the rest of the world and a couple folks sitting behind a desk in China, right? So it's the data that's being collected, and then what is that used for? I've been reading some articles lately. I was a couple on Reuters the other day that talk about the algorithm that's inside not just TikTok, but all areas, right? So it's taking the information that you're using and it's putting it through an algorithm. And if you search this kind of person or dance or company, well, then everything you're starting to see is going to be coming in from that because the algorithm is always changing and people don't always think about that. So you've got to think about the data that's being collected and then the algorithms that are being used against you, for you, targeting you. To me, that's the piece that is the scary part and why it's starting to get banned. I think what started with Maryland, now we're 20 states, maybe 22 states in. And so that high level, that's my thought.
And I will say the one thing I'm not seeing a lot of outcry. People saying, hey, why are you so up in arms about all of this TikTok silliness? So maybe that's a good signal that it's some of this information getting through. Because thinking about it, if you're 15, 16, it's great. You're posting these dance videos, but you're probably posting private stuff on there too that you may not want everyone necessarily to see, right, because it may be embarrassing. It may be not politically correct. It may be unwoke. 10 years from now, you're now a State Department employee stationed in your first overseas station to Beijing. And then the Chinese have all this information. They can use it against you.
People are the weakest link in business and society as a whole. And so they're using it from a convenience perspective, and it's the trend, but you don't always think about the security and the privacy aspect that comes now or comes later. And, I've always, whenever we do presentations, people are always like, hey, is this actually going to happen? And it's like, you know what? We could come up with 100 scenarios. Maybe they never happen, but why give anybody the opportunity for any of those Chicken Little scenarios to happen?
Right. And I mean, and it's not like this is the first technology that was made by a foreign country that had this issue. It all started with the Russian Faces app years ago.
Absolutely.
That you could see what you look like when you're older. Now, that one died out a lot quicker than this one clearly is. But I mean, there's not other apps that you can dance to.
That is true. But again, who owns the data? And it clearly is sitting in China. And so you have to be careful just because they're going to use that in some form or fashion against folks.
Right. So, which brings us to it's holiday season. So parents are buying technology for their kids. Now, interesting, I put a poll out yesterday about, are you buying technology for your kids or not? And 2-1 is the answer was no. Now, my thought on that is people are not exactly defining technology the same way I am. Because if you buy your kid a Bluetooth or wireless headset for their Xbox, you're buying them technology. So but that's fine. I mean, whatever. But,
right.
So now you have to figure out, or are you even thinking about what are the security precautions for having that technology? How are you allowing it to connect to your network at your house? So, what do you tell your family members, your friends, when they ask you, okay, I'm buying all this technology, what should I do with it?
You tell them if it doesn't need to be connected, don't. I mean, that's my whole first thing is if it definitely needs to be connected, let's secure everything. I mean, and we're seeing this on the business side, not just our family and friends, but the business side. Everybody's remote working, and the routers that they're using, they haven't changed the username and password to get into the router. Well, somebody's sitting there listening or connecting through an IP address to get to the router and using the default password and username, and they can now control everything you're doing. And so you really got to make sure you're securing that perspective. And smart devices aren't helping. And a couple of years ago, there was this whole thing with Sidewalk by Amazon. Do you remember that? Where
Sure.
you could share your Wi-Fi through all of your devices, and it was an opt-out option. Like you had to go in and say, I don't want to do that. It just automatically did that. So, when I talk to my family, it's just try to be as secure as you can. If it doesn't need to be connected, don't connect it. I have one relative that said, hey, everybody, we're taking all this stuff. If I don't know what it is, it's not on our phones. We're not playing these games. I got backlash because they were getting more bored, but I was like, it's the secure way to do it. And if you don't need to be connected, don't be connected, but then use good passwords, use managers that you are comfortable with, but just make sure you've done a good job of password hygiene.
Yeah, and I would say if you want to really know how bad your network is, go into your router if you have the capability and see what's connected to it right now. Absolutely. I mean, I did this a while ago, and that's just my wife and I, and we probably have 30 devices connected. So it's bad security on my part, but I kind of know what they all are, and they're all password protected. But if you have new technology, if you're getting Xboxes, you're getting PlayStations, you're getting new TVs, you're getting iPads, create a DMZ or a guest network and let them all connect to that. They can still get out through the internet, but your main devices, like if you got a work computer or a home computer that's part of your home business, at least then you've reduced that surface area for attackers to get from one device into another.
And then monitor. That's the other thing is monitor. Right. If I've got an app on my phone for mine that when something connects, it tells me unknown device, and it tells me what the address is, and I should know what's connecting, or I anticipate something connecting, so then it doesn't surprise me. Well, if something connects and I know we have nothing new, then all right, now I'm going to start diving in. It's going to go over here, and I'm going to make sure I understand what it is before it truly has all connections. I have my router has a firewall that everybody has their own little piece, and so I know when this kid is on. I know when this kid is on. and I know what they're on. So you've got to monitor what you have as well. That's the big piece.
So I use a firewall. What do you use for yours?
I use Decos. I have the Deco routers, and it's got one built in that.
Okay, that's nice. Yeah,
kind of lets you. It does a lot, and I'm not recommending Deco to anybody on this podcast, but it's the one I use, and it's really helpful. And again, you just got to monitor, you got to understand, and when something doesn't seem right, you got to go in there and adjust it.
Yeah, I mean, firewall is the same thing. It's a hardware device that connects. Because I have Google Fiber, and their router is limited in its security options. Let's just say. I mean, that's not the guest network, but beyond that, not much beyond that. So at least the firewall, every time my wife watches a video on YouTube, I get a firewall connection. Hey, this video is watching on YouTube. Okay, that's fine. My in-laws are visiting. They have a TV in their room. Every time my father-in-law turns on Hulu, I get a Hulu thing saying, hey, someone's watching Hulu on your network. Okay, yeah, I know what that is. Of course, you can turn that stuff off if you want to. But again, I'm not recommending necessarily firewall. It's just an option that I went with. But look for something that at least gives you an idea of what's going on in your network. So yeah, that's
mine gives me a report at the end of each month, and it says, here are the things that we denied. And it is specific to things coming in on certain apps or certain, TV shows or commercials or whatever. I get a new app that we're using on a TV. It will tell me if it's been denied. So I constantly look at that. Again, that's the whole piece is I think you say it, knowledge is protection. I'm using your term. Knowledge is protection. The knowledge of what is hitting my system at home helps me stay protected.
Right. And so for parents, I would also say if your preteens, your adolescents, you're giving them phones, you're giving them iPads, put on some kind of content restriction capability on your phone so you can turn the thing on and off.
Absolutely. And age appropriate too. Right. As they start to change, you've got to adjust that, but it won't allow certain things. And you can go in there and say, hey, I don't want this showing up on these devices. I want it on these, but maybe not these devices. So again, you got to be plugged in and you got to know what's happening.
And that brings up another interesting question. What is your take on the knowledge that the general parent has just regarding technology and cybersecurity in general? We kind of know where you and I stand on, what businesses think and, their compliance issues and the things they're mandated to do. And even the things they're mandated to do, they aren't doing very well. Our DoD is trying to implement the cybersecurity maturity model certification. They can't even get that right. They can't make it happen. So, how do you find parents' capabilities?
I mean, I think it's probably more they're focused more on technology being a convenience for them, so they're not thinking about privacy, they're not thinking about security, and whatever they know, it's if there's somebody that's a self-educator and they go read articles, yeah, they're up to speed on what's going on, and maybe they've tried the chat bot that's out there that everybody's talking about, but most people aren't. Most people don't know, and anything any knowledge they do have is coming from maybe their workplace. And so they're not focused on that. And that's not something, and I think normal society doesn't think about security the way you and I and our colleagues that are in this industry every single day think about it. And we've really got to change that culture. So everybody's thinking about it in terms of, I need to be more private, more secure than I need to have convenience. And so everybody could probably use a refresher and hey, let's really go change this. And some of it is, again, out of sight, out of mind. I'm not an IT person, so I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to use the technology. I think it was Carl Sagan. I always use Carl Sagan's speech where he talks about how we are a society based on science and technology, and we don't truly understand either, but we use it every single day. And we cannot be like that. We have to understand the technology. And I think we talked about that at the very beginning. Understand what you're using, understand what you're doing with the information, the technology, the data, so that you can stay secure from that perspective.
And I think that part of it is just there's information for free everywhere. I mean, I have tried to give away information for free and no one wants to take it. Why does no one want to take it, Paul? I'm giving them free information and no one wants to accept it. How do I get past that particular?
It's the apathy, right? It's the apathy piece, right? Yeah. When anybody sees an article, and this is what I say in my presentations, and I use you as an example because I always talk about your podcast, this podcast. I say, look, education is important, but you've got to have self-education. You've got to not look at the article headline and go, it's just another breach. It's just another issue. It's just another concern. I'm going to move on because I have apathy for everything that's going on in society from a security perspective. We have to stop the apathy. We have to everybody has to listen to this podcast on a regular basis. Find other podcasts. Do something every day to educate yourself. Don't wait for your company to do it. Talk to your friends about it. Hey, what are you doing? How have you handled this? And what you will find is most people are like, oh, I just don't deal with it, or that's not a security concern of mine. We've got to change that. We've got to get rid of that apathy and continue being part of the national narrative. I appreciate all that you do and other folks in this industry that is just trying to get the information out. Let's just educate folks, but we got to have the folks listening. Well, we got to get rid of that apathy.
Yeah, and thank you for promoting the podcast. That $20 check for December is in the mail, so pretty soon. But Estelle is listening. She makes a good point that she says, I think most parents are not educated in safe online navigation. They will often maintain the peace with their kids by putting them in front of the iPad. That is a great point. And it's a point I made a week or two ago on a poll is, are you your friend's protector or your kid's friend? Because that's where, as far as technology stands, that's kind of where you got to come down. Which part of that do you want to be? I had some person posted they were going to be both. I'll be honest with you, cannot be both. You have to be one or the other. And if you're the protector, if you're gonna, that's your best route, obviously, because you want to protect your kids. If you're your friend, you're going to let them do whatever they want to do because you don't want your friend to be mad. So you have to first decide, what do you want to be as a parent, and then make those decisions based around that decision you make.
That's a great point. I've got, I've got two kids. One, their online game that they use, they have the friends that I've allowed them to, and the other one has 100 friends, and they just, I'm just accepting everybody. And it's like, no, we can't do that. And then I've got another one that every time they get a spam text message, they come, hey, is this spam? So they're thinking about it, right? Because we've talked about it in our household. We have to have everybody having those conversations to really change it, because, well, my friend's doing that. My friend's doing that. My friend's doing that. Why can't I do that? Well, because we're thinking more about security than the other aspect.
I mean, my daughter's 25 now. She was on this podcast a year and a half ago or so. And I asked her about her when she first started getting a cell phone and being on social media. And she even said, I probably was on it way too often, way too late. Cause I didn't use restrictions. I trusted them and I could kind of monitor the network a little bit. And I didn't really see a whole lot of stuff. And I knew that she had rules that, like, on her social media accounts, rule number one was I was the first connection to their social media. That lasted till about 16. And then, I kind of lost track of everything they were tagging into, but that's really you come up with rules and really, beyond just the hacking that we talk about here with TikTok and the nation state actors. I mean, one of the things that I don't talk a lot about on this podcast, I probably need to just devote an episode to, is sexting and sextortion. On the Get Cyber Smart podcast, I talked about that for 7 to 10 minutes as part of a protecting your kids online thing. Shameless plug. But, that whole thing by itself has got a whole host of issues that kids and parents, I don't think, realize once they introduce that technology, that when kids are by themselves doing, think about when you were 17 or 16 or 17 and you had your first girlfriend, and now you have this capability to quickly communicate with them things you probably shouldn't be communicating. As soon as they take a picture and send it, they've have the potential of having committed distribution of child pornography online, which is a bad place to want to be.
Wow. Yeah. Did you see where Texas, an article, I think it was last week, Texas was trying to ban social media for anybody under the age of 18.
Yeah.
I mean,
good luck.
I mean, that's policy, that's conversation. You and I've had this discussion all the time. You really need true action, and that's going to be a really tough thing for anybody to do. I get what they're trying to say, but there's just no way in the way that the internet and technology and social media works, it's just not going to happen. There's always a workaround. Somebody's always going to find the other issue.
Yeah, like I like to say, once technology advances like this, the bad guys are very quickly figuring out how to modify that. When it comes to parents are very slow trying to come up with methodologies to protect the kids online, but the kids are much quicker overcoming whatever that is.
There's so many more of them than they are of the parents, right? They're all doing it, and it's like, well, I'm following that person. Well, they followed this person, and maybe that person doesn't have a guardian at home to tell them this isn't right. So now you're 4 or 5 links down and everybody's still doing it. So you've really got to, it's a lot of conversation, but you got to have more action than just discussion.
Yep. So you sent me an article about a Roomba taking a picture of a lady in the bathroom.
Man, I tell you what, you talk about an algorithm and you talk about just the data supply chain. When I read that, you're the first person I thought of, and I was like, we've got to at least mention this, because it goes back to, and I want to give the right people. It was an article by MIT Technology Review. It was yesterday, December 19th, and it talked about how there was a startup that contracts with. It's an artificial AI startup company that contracts to get all of the pictures and videos. That's the data supply chain I was talking about earlier, from other folks, and they use those pictures, those videos, that information to train AI to be able to get better and smarter and faster, right? And so this whole article, you should go out and read it, but it talked about how somebody had a Roomba that was connected to the internet, and it was the kind that takes the picture when it's cleaning your house, and it took a picture of a lady on a bathroom and on a toilet, and somehow through that selling of data supply chain, that video ended up on social media. And it was because maybe the wrong person received data that shouldn't have. But it just points to the fact of, if it doesn't need to be connected, don't connect it, right? That's not absolutely necessary. It's okay to buy. I think I've now started hearing the term dumb TVs. Go get a dumb TV that's not connected to anything, that just shows you what you want to see. And I think that's the big issue, is understand the technology, understand that it's taking pictures as it goes around the house. Maybe you should shut the door and it doesn't come into the bathroom, or maybe don't even have one altogether. No offense to Roomba. And I'm not saying don't buy a Roomba. I'm just saying make sure you get the one that you actually need, not something that just has bells and whistles that looks cool. I read that article and I just couldn't help but laugh the entire time.
Well, I laugh because I have the Roomba like that with the camera and the light and all that stuff. But the best thing is it goes around and it sends me a message saying, how can train Roomba to clean better? And it gives me a map of my downstairs where it's working. Right. But the nice thing is when it goes back to the base, it automatically sucks the stuff up. So I don't have to keep emptying the bin. So that's the advantage for me. But so all it's going to show here though is the cat and the dog being running away from it when it's going around. So there is
that's the point, that society, when you talk about what does society that's not in our industry every day need to learn, they need to learn that it's okay to have these things, just know how they're being used and use them in a manner that they should be, and not, hey, I don't understand this, so I'm just going to give it access to everything. And so it's okay that we don't say don't have things connected to the internet. We just say use it wisely, if that could be a thing.
That's right. So what is the Perry plan for the holidays?
Perry plan for the holidays is to sit back and relax and try to enjoy it. We celebrate several holidays during December, so our kids get a feel of all the activities and all the history of everything. So it's we're gonna lay low. We're not gonna do much. We're not traveling. If you want to see us, come to us. That's our motto this year.
That's good. That's a good call. So what's the new technology though coming? You know, they got new technology.
Well, I don't think.
I just want to tell what the presents are, but they're not listening.
They're not listening. They're not paying attention. I think we're getting some hoverboards, but from outside of that, I don't think there's actually any major technology that's happening. So there's nothing new that I need to make sure is being secure, unless the hoverboard connects to the internet, which I don't think it does. So I think we'll be good there.
What about for yourself? What kind of technology do you want for Christmas or Hanukkah?
Secure technology is what I want, Darren.
So not this year. So you're not getting. So I guess
you're not getting anything this year. Nothing this year. No, nothing this year. I think again, it's out there. It's got its purpose. It's got its use, and you've got to use it. Protect. What about you? What are you looking for this year?
12-string guitar. That's the thing I'm looking for.
Nice.
I don't play guitar very well, but I figure I can play the 12-string just as badly as I play the 6-string, but it'll sound cooler, I guess.
That's good.
Yeah. So as you look into 2023, what do you see as the threats coming for 2023?
I think the more things that get connected to the internet for manufacturing companies, IoT devices that companies are using to make things more convenient, make things more efficient. I think making sure you lock those down. I don't think the threats to healthcare go away, and I think you may have had a couple posts on healthcare, but it's the whole aspect of we're using vendor products from 10 years ago that can't be upgraded to the new security, to the new platforms, and so you've got to make sure it's all segmented. I think you're going to see that. When is the pendulum going to swing back to security from convenience? And I don't know the answer to that. But I feel like it's going to take a big event. I feel like it's going to take 10, 20% of retirement going away in a theft. It's going to take one of the big banks to get breached, and everybody wakes up overnight, and you and I are sitting there going, "Told you so. You needed to prepare for this." I think we're due for one of those big gotcha moments that everybody stops and reconsiders everything from a cybersecurity perspective. I don't want it to happen. Definitely don't want it to happen in healthcare. I definitely don't want to happen in financial, but that's where the information is, and that's what they're going to go after. So I think that's what it's going to be. But it's also, we're seeing an uptick in it's the vendors, it's the third parties that you know about that you use. Maybe they don't have the right security. It's the third parties you don't know about, because maybe it's the fourth, fifth, sixth parties to your company. I think you're going to see some of those big breaches occur where people finally just kind of go, wait a minute, we've got to change what we're doing, and we got to stop thinking of security and IT as an expense, and we got to start thinking of it as a revenue protector. If I can't protect the data that I'm given for my clients, I'm not going to have any clients. If I don't have any clients, I'm not going to have any revenue. We've got to change that mindset, I think, in the business society. I would hope you agree with that last statement.
Oh yeah, and I was on a webinar today, and they were talking. It had to do with insurance and stuff, but they were talking about the average ransomware cost now is about $9.8 million if you get hit with ransomware, and there's been, the Russian and Chinese have stolen over $1 trillion worth of goods from a breach standpoint across all sectors. And I think the other issue, and you kind of touched on it, is operational technology, because that is where they're trying to move convenience by blending operational technology with the information technology. The operational technology, like you said, is older, that's not upgradable, but they're still trying to connect it to the IT because they want that convenience of being able to remotely access it and deal with it, so they don't have to have someone on staff to deal with it. So it's cheaper for them. Right. The problem, of course, is that a lot of that stuff doesn't interact with it very well. And once you break it, it's hard to fix it. And I don't think we've had that big event. Colonial Pipeline was not a breach of OT. It was a breach of the financial system, but it impacted OT because it closed everything down. So imagine if they'd actually hit the OT side, then we'd have had, all sorts of problems. Exactly what you said.
Sorry, you said you mentioned something about ransomware and insurance, cyber insurance. You got to start reviewing the exclusions, because there's going to be more and more exclusions to cyber liability insurance going forward. I mean, I think March of 23, all Lloyd's of London backed cyber policies will not pay for an attack that is deemed to be nation state backed. Well, what is your definition of nation state backed, right? And so that is going to start happening. We're starting to see ransomware being excluded, and we're starting to see cloud providers excluded in insurance policies. And it's like, hey, if you've got a big cloud provider, I'm not going to name any of them, but if you've got one of them you're using, that's excluded from this policy because it should really be their policy. So a lot of people are going to get into some insurance policies for cyber liability insurance, and they're potentially going to have an issue, and then they're not going to get paid because of one of these exclusions. So you need to know what those are. But you talked about ransomware, and I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and I think that I had a thought there. I lost track of what it was. So probably wasn't that important anyway. It had to do with something. So Estella has this question here. Are you guys doing talks in schools with kids and teenagers? That'd be powerful. I know I'm available to do that if asked, but I don't get a lot of people asking me to do it. I offer it, but I won't take it. It's all free.
Well, and I think that's the thing is, reach out to local law enforcement, federal law enforcement. They're always willing to have those conversations. And I think that's where it has to start. And they may not understand everything you're saying, and you've got to change our conversation for them. But it definitely needs to start there so that they go home and say, hey, Mom, I really don't need this connected to the internet, or I need you to check on these settings because I don't need to have this kind of access. And if you do that, then maybe you start to change the culture.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So you mentioned the Lloyd's of London not paying for nation state attacks. And my argument would be almost every attack's nation state oriented, but that's the CI guy in me, counterintelligence guy. But I think every insurance writer has indemnification. That's maybe the right word, but for acts of war or acts of terrorism. So you convert that to acts of cyber war, acts of cyber terrorism. Then you got to define what that is. I don't think I've ever heard anyone correctly define cyber warfare. Everybody tries, right. But there's not one distinctive definition for what that is. So I think there's going to be somebody that's hit, and they're not going to get paid because it was an act of cyber war, and then it's going to come down to some court's going to have to define what that means.
And my argument there, and we've had this discussion internally with some of the folks here, is if you have a ransomware gang that is sitting in a nation state borders, and the nation state knows about them, but they do nothing, they don't stop them, they don't deny them the ability. To me, that's nation state backed, but it's not the actual nation state doing it. So there's going to be a case in the first 6 months of next year when this comes through, and there's going to be an argument about the definition, and we're finally going to maybe hear what that definition is, but we're going to have that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Paul, any last thoughts? I appreciate the time. This was a good 30 minutes. We probably could have gone longer, but I'll be honest, I didn't come up with enough topics. So I was lazy. I was lazy for this podcast, so I apologize for that.
Well, I think for now, it's have the discussion. Darren and I can sit here and have a discussion forever how long, because we are constantly having that discussion. We're constantly engaged in the narrative of what's going on. And I would just tell folks that are listening to this, don't have the apathy. Actually be engaged with what's going on from a security perspective, and respond to it. If it seems unusual, it probably is, and you probably need to do something. So that's my whole thing. And I'm not going to steal your tagline, but just know what your risks are.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. You. For everybody else who took the time to stick in here, I appreciate you coming on the live stream on YouTube or LinkedIn. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. As you go through your week, remember, knowledge is protection. If you can understand the threats targeting you, you can assess your risk and proceed wisely. Find this podcast on all your favorite podcast providers. Share the YouTube link, share the LinkedIn link, and email me with all the crap that I did wrong at Darren@CyBUrGuy.com. Thanks so much. Have a good week. We will talk soon.